You are listening to Her Brotherhood. This is a place where we celebrate women who put their lives on the line every day. We share their stories, their trials, their tribulations. It's just a really great place for you guys to be and meet some amazing women so that we can inspire those who are coming up and get those young girls to realize they can do anything. And with that, I can't wait to introduce you to Bobbie. Thanks for being here. Please go check out herbrotherhood.com for more, and be sure to look at the show notes for any tidbits from this episode that you might want to follow up on. Thank you. It's an honor to spend this time with you. All right, we are here on Her Brotherhood podcast. We are talking to the infamous Bobbie Scopa. She laughs. But oh no, this lady has made quite an impact in the career of me and many other firefighters, not just women firefighters that I know. So wow. Bobbie, welcome to Her Brotherhood.
Thank you very much. I am so excited to be talking with you.
Yeah. So tell me, give me the elevator pitch on who Bobbie Scopa is, like right now. Right now.
Well, right now, Bobbie Scopa is a retired firefighter enjoying the heck out of retirement. I spend my winters down in Arizona, and I spend some time at the botanical gardens giving tours because my love of the desert ecology is great. And when people come, I give tours to the visitors at the botanical gardens. And I can bore people for hours if they want to stick around that long and listen to my explaining about how the plants are adapted in the desert. But I do that some of the time. I'm working on a little house down here. I ride my motorcycle. And then in the summers, I get the heck out of Dodge because it's too hot down here in Arizona, in southern Arizona in summer. And I head up to the Anacortes area in Washington on Puget Sound, and I live on a boat. And take the boat out and go chugging around the San Juan Islands. And I'm hoping to get up towards Alaska maybe this summer, maybe next. So that's my life now that I'm retired.
That is so cool. I know, because I see all your houseboat adventure sharing, and it's just, that's cool. Like, I couldn't even imagine, and now watching you do that, it actually has kind of hit my mind. I imagine maybe one day like traveling in retirement on a big, getting myself one of those big old diesel pushers. But now, I think the boat is way cooler.
Yeah, it's I've always liked boating, and when I decided to live on the boat a few years ago, I decided I was going to give up sailing and get a power boat because they're much bigger and more spacious inside. So,
and don't require wind.
They don't require wind, yeah.
So when did you retire?
I retired at the end of the fire season in 2018.
Oh, yeah.
I think the Mendocino complex was my last fire assignment, and I found out while I was on that assignment that I was going to be able to retire in September, and so that's what I did.
Nice. So pre-2018 then, so this is the retired Bobbie. This is second chapter. What would have been your elevator pitch that year?
Well, that year, I had been part of that year, I had been on medical leave. I actually had been, that's a big part of my last couple of years in my career. Unfortunately, the 2015 fire season was almost it damaged me from all of the other injuries to your emotional health, that happened. 2015 was like the cap of it all. That was the fires we had up in Twist where we had more fatalities. I had been the forest fire chief up there previously. There were families that I knew were impacted by. One of the families I knew had a child that was impacted and killed in that fire. There was lots of issues surrounding that. I had been on the forest the day of the fire, the day of the fatalities, visiting because my job was at the regional office at that point. So it's hard to talk about 2018, my last year with the Forest Service, without talking about what happened in 15. And so I was actually off on medical for about 3 months because it was just, that was weighing on me. And then I had an issue with a supervisor that was, I was having a difficult time dealing with. And so, so the last year or two, I was kind of in and out of my regular job. And I had spent 8 months assigned to the Washington office, part of that being the deputy fire director for the Forest Service nationally back in D.C. Mm-hmm. And so that was an education too.
That's what I was going to say. Going from the field, I mean, fairly when you're in chief mode, you are kind of stuck more on the laptop, but going from those field fire jobs and going into the WO, what did you think about that? Were you like, damn, I should have spent my whole career here? Or were you like, thank God this is a detail?
No, it was a good thing it was a detail. I had been on a detail back to the WO earlier in my career when I was a forest fire chief before I went to the RO. And that was, I was in a position that was a little bit lower down. But when I went back and I was working as the deputy fire director, you get your eyes open to a lot of things. I mean, with my first week, I was sent to represent the agency at the Senate Armed Forces Committee, talking about air tankers, so that was pretty cool. And to be able to say I was in their offices, that was very cool. But there's so much politics going on that, and I don't want to get into details of some of that stuff, but there's so much that goes on that you just shake your head. If people in the field, if the engine captain out in the field would hear some of those conversations, they would just be like, what the heck is going on? Mm-hmm. And what stands between some of the goofy crap that occurs or is said back there and that engine captain is people who are representing that captain. So you're speaking truth in that environment, because some of the folks are so far removed from the field. Some of them have never even been in the field. Right. And so it takes someone to represent them.
Yeah, and that's honestly, that's like a whole conversation that we should dedicate an episode to now that you're retired. And, it doesn't matter really the opinion you share, because it doesn't matter if you're in fire, federal fire, if you're in, if you're in structure fire, if you're in the military, if you're law enforcement, there's all these frustrating levels. Federal, it just happens to be, it is so far removed, from going from the little district office all the way to the WO. And you bang your head at the level that you were at whether you're at the forest level, but you're just banging your head on the wall and you can't figure out why you can't make change. Well, then you've got this second-year firefighter who really is banging their head against the wall about something. Yeah. They think you're just an idiot and you're not doing your job. And you're like, right. No, I'm being affected on so many levels. And yeah, trying to get that all the way down. But what's really frustrating is when you're at a point where no matter how hard you try and you can't make a difference, and getting all the way up in that Washington level and seeing still thinking like, I can get to here and now I can make a difference. I'll be up here and I'll tell them how it is. And man, it's hard.
What you just said is so true. I always thought, I never had any big dreams to promote because I wanted the position I wanted the status or the money. It was always about, if I just had that one job ahead of me, above me, I could make a difference. That one job, that's going to be the one. You go from a captain to battalion chief, division chief, whatever you're doing, it's always, I can make a difference there. And you do, and you can, but you never can make the difference that you really hope that you could. And to illustrate that, I got to be, I think I can say without any worries that I got to know Tom Harbour pretty well over the years. The previous
now, for those who don't know, explain. Yeah, what did he go out as?
And when Tom got within a month or two of his retirement, back in, I guess it would have been the end of 2015, he finally said, "Bobbie, all these arguments that we've been having over the years about what we should be doing," he said, "I can tell you, I agree with 90% of what you've been saying. I just couldn't make those happen. I was telling the chief the same things." And so I realized if the National Fire Director couldn't affect the changes that we all thought we needed to see. Me as a force fire chief or battalion chief, I wasn't going to be able to make the changes, but we all have those abilities to affect change. I affected change at every level I ever worked at. So you just got to do what you can.
Yeah. So, looking back on your career, your best advice, because it's so easy to just go, well, I'm never going to be able to make a difference anyway. I'm wasting my time. Yeah. I might as well put my feet up and play Angry Birds for my 8 hours a day. A lot of people go into that checkout mode. So what's your best piece of advice for a mid-level, whether it's fire, military, whatever, if you're in that mid-management place and you know that something needs to change, you need to make a difference, how do you take that bite of the elephant? Like, what are the small things?
Well, everybody, no matter if you're the last shovel on the crew, or if you are, the force fire chief or the city fire chief or anywhere in between, we all have, and I believe this so much, we all have the ability to affect change right around us. How we speak to each other, that affects the crew performance. If you're on an engine and there's 3 or 4 people, and you're Debbie Downer, you're going to be affecting that crew. If you're the captain and you set the tone for that crew, you're going to have an impact on that crew. And if you whatever position you're in, if you're the boot fire, I used to get told when I was brand new on a hotshot crew, this was back in the 70s, I would ask questions. How can we do this? And they would say, shut up and dig. And I would say, well, okay, I'd wait a little bit. And I'd say, well, what about that? Shut up and dig. But you can ask questions sometimes, and then those questions will lead to, maybe we should do something different. Maybe we, as the explanation gets described to you, the person in charge might say, oh yeah, that's not a bad idea. Or later they'll say, yeah, that's a good thing. They might not admit it to you. They might not say, hey, that was a good idea. But you find the next time you're doing something a little bit different. And we have huge impacts on those around us that way. And no matter what job you're in. And of course, if you're a supervisor, even a squad boss or an engine captain, you start having more influence and speaking up at meetings. I have a good friend who was a battalion chief, and we would have our force chiefs meeting, and she was a friend of mine too. I had known her for years before I was the chief, and she was a battalion chief. And it was a big organization. We probably had 8 battalion chiefs on that unit. And after the meetings, I would say, hey, did you like what happened? Oh, yeah, it was good. I said, you didn't say much. Well, no, but everybody was saying what I thought, and it went the way I thought it should go. And I said, well, you want to see yourself, you want people to see you as a leader, right? Well, sure, of course. Well, how do they know what you believe to be the case? Or maybe something wasn't exactly right. How do you impact that? You impact it by being visible. I've often said that you can't have invisible leaders, and everybody's got different leadership style, but that doesn't mean you can be sitting back, being quiet, and being unseen. And so in her case, I said, if you want to be seen as a leader, which in my world, in my thinking, that means being able to affect change. That means you have to be visible. People have to know where you stand. And that doesn't mean you have to be a jerk about it. You don't have to be a bitch and, be pushy to the point of driving people nuts, which some people might say I did that. But I think we all affect change no matter where we are in the organization. And I think I affected change in every position I was ever in. And I think we all have that ability. You just have to want to do it.
Yeah, I think, ability and responsibility. A lot of people think, well, somebody else is going to handle it. Somebody else will figure it out. And there's that piece of, being because people are all thinking like, maybe some people just need to shut up and dig. Which,
Right.
yeah, there's definitely that fine line as coming up that we want people to understand and know, like when the questions do need to be asked. You do need to work, but you do need to ask questions. And I think a lot of it falls on leaders too, is like we now study a lot about leading by explaining the why, by giving the
Right.
why, so that your troops understand why you're there, why you're miserable, what's going on, what the bigger mission is. But yes, also being able to stop and be like, hey, Cap, I'm just curious,
Yeah.
why are we out on this ridge that's in the middle of nowhere for no reason, killing ourselves, and
You
because,
have to know that.
yeah, it's important.
Well, I would always use the example when I was a division supervisor on a wildfire. Um, I would always give the why, and before I would want the why. I would want to understand what's the point of us going from here to there, because things are going to change over the course of the shift you're working, and the conditions change to the point where you're going to have to do something different than what was the plan. And if you don't know the why, you're not going to know what to do to still accomplish the goal.
And you're not going to know
the
the what
why
ifs when things go sideways. If you don't know the why, you're not going to know the backup plan or be able to make one.
Yeah.
But I have observed too is that I think it's really important as a leader, if you are starting to get a lot of those, but why, why are we doing this? And all those,
Yeah.
you haven't briefed right. And you need to rebrief your folks or reinform them, because if they seem lost all the time and they're asking those questions, it's a really good indicator that maybe you need to start sharing your message a little more clearly, or be giving them more of that intent, that leader's intent that is really important. And so it's definitely a two-way street. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Well, God, we could, it's really hard to not have interviews like this go for hours and hours, because I always talk to gals like you that it's like we could sit at the bar and bullshit for so long about so many things. So I think I think we need to circle back a couple times and talk. And so I want to so that was the last couple years of your career. Tell me when I ask you, what's a shining year or a shining just kind of era in your career that when I go, tell me about your career, what's a piece that just shines to you and really pops up?
Well, I look back on the 45 years now. Some of that was seasonal time. Some of my favorite time was when I was working for a fire department, and I was a captain for about 8 years before I went back to grad school. And I was just about to say nothing significant happened, but lots of significant things happened during those 12 or 15 years on the department. But that was a great time because I loved the camaraderie on the engine. I worked with the same group for a long time. And, if you are on a municipal or a county department where you're on an engine crew or rescue, you're working with the same people day in, day out. And you develop a lot of you develop affections for these folks and their families and all that sort of thing. So for me, there's all these segments from my career, and that time with the fire department was special in a lot of ways. And if I tell a lot of my stories I tell on my website, they relate back to those years and a lot of the goofy, funny things that happened, and some of the serious, important calls I was on that at the time, and for years I didn't think they were that big a deal. But then when I tell the story and I think about it, or actually if I tell the story and record it and go back a few months later and listen to the story I told, I think, wow, that was significant. That was important. So I have some of those from the years I was on the fire department. I think one of my, here, I'll tell you one of the things, and for the folks who aren't federal, they might not understand it quite as much. But one of my biggest accomplishments, I feel, personal accomplishments from an organizational standpoint, is when I went to the regional office. I had been So this was the regional office in charge of the fire program from Oregon, Washington, and Alaska. And I had already been a forest fire chief in charge of 300 firefighters, 13 engines, helicopters, smoke jumpers, a big operation. Now I go to the regional office, and one of my goals, and I had something I've been working on for years, was trying to get our engine captains upgraded to GS8. Now, that was something that I'd been working on for several years on the forest, but I couldn't get the regional office support. And so one of my big accomplishments, I feel like I was able to get the GS8 captains changed from GS7 to GS8.
Yeah, that's a really, really huge step in a lot of eras for people that, like, from the outside don't realize, like, what a huge block that was. That's big. And
we got them to permanent full time. So even though, we didn't lay them off during the winter time, but we changed their status so now that they were officially permanent full time. And then everybody got bumped up. That was a big deal. I feel very strongly that how can we expect professional behavior, professional performance if we don't treat people like professionals? And so that was one of my accomplishments. I felt like I did at the regional office. So those are a couple of things that I always think about.
Well, and that's one of those leadership accomplishments too. It didn't have anything to do with you. It didn't have anything to do with. It wasn't going to give you an upgrade. It wasn't going to improve your benefits. It wasn't. It was about the people and those below you that you led. And those are the biggest things to be proud of in someone's career. Is how did you shift the entire culture? And that's a real important one.
Yeah. I think it's kind of passé to say it. Well, people are our most important resource. It's like, well, no shit, they're our most important resource. They're the ones doing the work. Mm-hmm. When I think once I got to be above the station level, where I was at either the force headquarters or beyond that, it became very clear I wasn't doing any work. I wasn't getting anything done. The only work that I got done was through the folks that were pulling the hose, cutting the line, and so what should I be doing? Well, I would tell my folks when I got to the regional office, if we're not thinking about what is this work I'm doing, how is it going to have a direct impact on the folks on the ground, then we ought to be thinking about what it is we're doing, because that's our job. I think that's important to just keep in mind. It's simple, but I think if you move up the ladder to the point where you kind of forget or aren't seeing the impacts your work is having on the folks accomplishing the work on the ground, then maybe you need to reassess how you're looking at work.
Yeah, absolutely. I always kind of picture it like as it's an orchestra, right? You're the maestro. You've got your little stick, and, and you can make that song go and move. But if you're not taking care of your flutes, song doesn't work. Right? If you're not taking care of your wind section, the song's out, and you got to take care of your instruments. You got to take care of your people, and you're the maestro at the orchestra.
Well, see, you have that analogy because you were at the battalion chief level, and you felt like you could conduct the orchestra. By the time I got to the force level, I felt like all I was doing is trying to get everybody to sit down in their
seats. You were opening the doors at the event center. You're like, God, everybody, get it together.
By the time I got to the regional office, I was doing nothing. Said, everybody get in here,
Right.
So I like your analogy.
You're parking lot security at this point, it sounds like.
That's right.
That's
exactly
interesting,
right.
though, because that is interesting, because that's where I was at. I was battalion chief, and so I see that piece, and then the higher up, that is very interesting, because that's how I did feel. I feel like, you're at that point. If you took care of your people at that place, you could make that song work and pull off the event, and that is God, to feel like parking lot security at the orchestra is frustrating trying to run the show.
You get to a point so far up that you're just like, would someone invite me to the concert?
Right. I want to come in and hear the music.
That's right.
Right. Well, and then, so yeah, at the Washington level. And, we get so frustrated at our overhead. We get so pissed. And yeah, we all talk crap constantly about those above and those above. And, there's a point where it's like, yeah, but you don't really know how it is up there. You don't know how it is in the RO. You don't know how it is at that. And I mean, just at the battalion level, I'd be like, look, you don't get it. Like, I'm getting pressure from this. And you're in these little bitty places. And it is all politics. And, you look all the way up. But when you do go to some of those places and you go to some of those meetings and you do pull the curtains back, there's times where you're like, no, this is wrong. You are doing it wrong. Yeah. You're not paying attention. You forgot what it feels like to have boots on the ground. And so there's a time to be like forgiving, knowing that there is something bigger going on, but there is a time to have your voice heard. Like you said, speak up in the meetings, try to make a difference, because while we do need to give the benefit of doubt to above, it's not always earned. So I think it's important that we have people speaking up.
It reminds me of a story when I was a forest fire chief, and I would go to the regional fire management leadership meetings. And there would be a couple hundred people in a big conference room. And someone is speaking up in the front, and they're from either the regional office or the Washington office. And they're saying stuff that makes you realize they don't really either remember what it was like, or maybe they never did the work, but they're speaking with some authority, like, and everybody in the audience pretty much knows that they're full of beans. And I got to a point where the folks who knew me would, like, imagine you're in a big conference room and there's a couple hundred people in there. People would start turning around to look at me. And they're waiting for me to be the one to
she's
raise your hand and say, I got to call bullshit on this,
Right.
And you say it politely.
Right.
But it happened all the time where people would turn around to look at me. Are you going to say something?
Right.
Because I don't know why they felt intimidated to the point that they couldn't speak up. But that was, I was at a meeting with the national office leadership, like the deputy chief of the Forest Service, regional foresters, regional fire directors. This is the highest echelon of the Forest Service at the time, and they were speaking about problems like why are we having fatalities, so many fatalities? How come? What's causing it? And so they were like brainstorming and coming up with ideas. And I actually said the words. I stood up. I put my hand up. And I said, "I got to call bullshit on this. This is wrong." And they all looked at me, like some of the people there looked at me like, yeah, no kidding, it's BS. And thank you for saying it. The other people looked at me like I had just, I had a big horn growing out of my forehead or something. They were just like, what?
Right.
It's
oblivious.
BS,
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, that's probably a good reason why I wouldn't have been a good fit for the Washington office, but because I was clear like that. But it behooves all of us to speak up.
Imagine how much change there could be, though, if somebody in the Washington office was that clear on a regular basis and not worried about how they were going to get smacked down or if they weren't going to be able to get that next position or that next thing. I mean, it is all politics. You're trying not to piss certain people off so you can get what you need and what you want. And not just for you, but for your program. And there has to be, I mean, that's why I have so much respect for you, because we kind of play on that same field. You didn't sit there and think like, I'm not going to stand up and call bullshit on this because I'm afraid of A, B, and C. Because you knew what was right. You weren't worried about the effects of it. You knew what was right and what was wrong. And it's to our detriment a lot of the time. It doesn't always serve us well, but you know that it needs to be said not for you, but for the program or for whoever it affected.
Yeah. There's a fine line, and I've mentored other younger firefighters. I've talked to my son about this. He's in the military. There's a fine line you walk about speaking up. And I think it's important to speak up, but there's the right way to do it and the wrong way to do it. And when I said I got to call bullshit on this in front of all the Washington office folks, maybe that wasn't the right way to do it, but I was to a point where I was
some shock factor.
Well, right. That's true. But but you're always walking that line, how much you can push, how much you need to pull, when do you just pull back a little bit. It's kind of, I mean, this is how I think of it. It's like being on the fire line. Or if you're pulling hose into a structure, same kind of thing. And you're watching around you. What am I doing? Am I still safe? Can I go forward? And so if you're on the fire line, do you still have your LCES in place as you keep changing? You turn the corner. Do I still have lookouts? Do I still have commo? Well, it's the same way in that meeting with the Washington office folks. You're constantly assessing, can I push here? Do I pull back? You got to read the room. When is it time to shock the folks into reality? When do you pull back? You can't just be a jerk all the time, because that's how you're seen sometimes. You can't be that way all the time. You have to just, you have to change your tactics. You have to change your language. And so you just got to be aware, I think. But you need to push. You need to push.
Yeah. Well, and you want it, when you do push and speak up, you want it to be heard. You don't want to be constant noise. And I've always struggled with, am I going to bitch about the stripe on the truck? Am I going to, are we going to talk about something that's going to save lives, But yeah, being one of those people where you sit in a meeting and you feel that elbow jab you in the side, and it's your buddy, like, you're going to say something, right? It's like, dude, you stand up and say something. No, you say it. Like, it's safer if I don't say anything. And then,
that's right.
Yeah. And not everybody has that. Not everyone, whether it's a gene that's inside of you, a way that you were raised, a way that they're just not everybody has that. So I don't fault the people that don't, but I do fault the people that know that they could and they should speak up and do something, because I think there's a lot more people that could bring more change, but they're more comfortable not, and they need to find that discomfort. If you're comfortable all the time, man, let me know what job that is and what you picked for a career, because everybody wants that, but we need to be able to speak up. So yeah, those are some really great points. And I love hearing your wisdom from your years, and I don't want you to stop sharing it, which is why I love that what you're doing now. What in the hell made you think that you wanted to go start recording your experiences? Tell me about that, Bobbie on Fire.
Well, so, my friends here in Arizona, they're friends that I've had since high school. And they're some of my best friends that I have. And I just naturally, I guess, tell stories. You know how it is. You get a couple firefighters together and you start saying, someone tells a story and it's like, oh, yeah, that reminds me of, and then you tell a story. Well, I've been doing...
And it's 3:00 in the morning at the bar and you still haven't gone home.
Of course, there's always beer involved. And they get better with beer, So, so as I was approaching retirement, I thought, oh, I'll tell you what, it started back when I worked for the fire department. Back when I had those little floppy disks in our computers, somewhere I have one of those floppy disks with a whole list of story topics from calls that I'd gone on. And I thought about putting them into story form for my kids. Well, I still have that floppy somewhere, but I don't have anything to read it.
God. Yeah, you got to find that and go take it somewhere and have them find it. That'd be cool.
So I thought, well, that's when it started, the idea of recording some of these stories. And then when I got to close to retirement, a good friend of mine who is now back in the Washington office, one of the experienced, knowledgeable female firefighters who's now back in the Washington office. I told her I was going to start writing these stories. And she said, oh no, you need to tell the stories because your voice, when you tell it, it's different. And we like to hear it. And I thought, well, okay, I guess, So I told one of my friends here in Arizona, he has a John, who, if anyone listens to my stories, who's often on my blog. He said, oh, I can help you set that up. And so he did all the technical stuff, showing me how to set it up. Well, I kind of thought, well, I'll tell maybe a half a dozen stories and I'm going to run out of stories, And then, so I have on my phone, I've got a little list of stories.
All those times you're driving down the road and you remember one.
Yes. So I go ahead and start writing them down. And I realized I've got more and more and more stories. And every time I think I'm going to run out, the list just keeps growing. And so I love telling the stories because it's interesting. I didn't think they were important stories. I mean, many of the stories I tell on the website, I think I'm up to 27 or 28. Many of the stories aren't significant in terms. It's just some goofy behavior of the firefighters working together at the station, pulling pranks on each other. Some of them are that way. But then some of them have some significant lesson in them. And at the time that I was thinking of the story, I didn't see the lesson. Sometimes it takes me to tell the story that I've told a dozen times before. But when I record it and then I go back and listen to it, I realize there's a lot to the story.
Yeah, the one I was just listening to of you about that call with the very affluent woman that you went on and knocked on the door. What's wrong in this house? And she seemed so put together. And, and you tell this whole story about this and how actually her home care provider was laying with a stroke on the kitchen floor. And you go through the whole thing. And then you're in the end, you're like, I don't know what the lesson of the story was. And then it hits you. You go, well, wait, I guess it's always, be looking for more and be looking deeper to see what's going on. And surprise, there was a really great lesson in that story.
There was the story, one of the stories that I tell that really, I think about a lot now after I've listened to me telling the story, is the one where the young gal fell off the cliff and we had to rescue her from a real steep talus slope at the bottom of a cliff, and she was so banged up. And she would have been dead the next morning had we not found her that afternoon, that evening. And we were about ready. We were loading up on the truck to leave because we couldn't find anyone. We didn't know for sure if there was anything there. And it was like that voice in me told the captain. So one of those times where I pushed, I was a new firefighter. I said, Captain, please let me take one last loop on the trail and see if I hear anything one more time. Because we had made a couple loops. We'd spent a half an hour looking or an hour looking. Couldn't find anyone. We didn't hear anything. And it was that ability to say, no, wait a second. Now, who am I? I'm a boot firefighter. The captain's been doing the job for 25 years. I said, do you mind if I just make one last run up there? And sure enough, I found her. And so, so there's some significant stories. To me, the funny part of that story, what was funny to me is the reason I used to tell the story is because when I gave her age and I'm talking on the radio to the hospital, I said, the scene found this patient. He's fallen off a cliff at approximately 60 feet. She's an approximately 30-year-old female. And this gal was so banged up she couldn't speak. Her face was all banged up. I mean, terrible lacerations and stuff. When I said she was approximately 30-year-old, she was trying to talk. And she said, when I realized what she was saying, I'm only 22.
Oh my God, like a woman, right? No, God, I'm dying, but don't
laugh.
Screw that up. Next thing you know, you're going to call her fat and it's all over.
I know. See, that was hilarious to me. And so that was what I always remembered the story. But there's a whole bunch more to that, when you get into it. But anyway, those stories are I mean, I tell them as much for my benefit as for anyone to listen to.
Mm-hmm. For memories to cache them in and to have those just wash away. I think every time that one of my mentors would retire, it would eat me up. Like I would feel like I would get in my point in my career where I was just really learning from these people or really being given opportunities by these people. And then it was like, surprise, time for retirement. And they just float away. And it's like, oh, but I had so much more I needed to learn from you and absorb from you just from like those from dinner at the fire camp and from BSing on the side of the line. Like I needed to hear more of that. So I think it's important that you leave that legacy because it kills me when people that have lives like you go on and then you're just done. And it's like, no, like I don't expect you to keep going AD for the rest of your life. My God, live a great retirement. But take those experiences so that those after us can can learn from them and
Yeah,
hear them.
thanks.
One, not feel so crazy. You know, you hear these other stories and you're like, you can resonate with them. And
Right.
then two is to hear stories and then when you run into them in your life, you know, it's going to,
Yeah,
because just that story that I just referenced where you went on that medical call and it turned out to be something more serious, or that one where you listened to that voice in your head and you went and looked for that girl again. People will hear those stories and they will be at those points in their lives and where they're going to, that voice on their shoulder can be your voice. They're not even going to realize it. It's going to be in
yeah,
their subconscious, but they'll hear this story. And it's not just a made up movie that they saw, you know, where Will Smith was doing something
right.
crazy. They're thinking about a real person who lived a real story. And so I think it's important. So I really appreciate that you're doing it. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, it's if anyone can gain something from the stories, then that's just a huge bonus to me. Because I mean, I don't know what it is about it. I mean, we all have stories. We all have stories that we can all learn from. You've got stories that I can learn from, but I think sometimes we just don't think they're worth telling, and we don't realize how valuable they might be to other people. Now, I'm just like you. I don't know if mine are all that valuable, but I hope they're entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
And so then maybe from the entertainment, we can learn something.
Yeah. Well, when I was thinking about listening to your stuff, and it reminded me of, like, I can't imagine probably how many classes you've taught in your career, fire classes. And,
Yeah.
and the best part of a class is the storytelling. That's how you really get a point across, right? You're trying to share this experience.
Right.
And of course, then there's a point where some of your classes are 24/7 storytelling. You're like, okay, guys, we actually have to instruct here at some point. But that's the best part of the class, is hearing old fire stories, old war stories, right? And that's really, so listening to your stuff is like, it's like the best parts of the class, because you're hearing the stories that tie in the lessons, that tie in the, you know, the training. And that those are the most important things. Because I can remember, I mean, all these classes that I took, I don't remember what in the hell was on the PowerPoint, but I remember the story that the instructor told me and that stuck.
Well, I think some people learn better by the stories, or I think a lot of people learn by the stories. And I know that I teach better when I'm related. I mean, there's the PowerPoint and there's the curriculum, that's the approved curriculum to teach. But my mind instantly goes to a story that supports and teaches that little lesson. And so, yeah, when I haven't taught a class for a couple of years, but I love teaching.
You're teaching a class every time you tell a story on your thing. So nice
good,
try.
Good.
Just without PowerPoint.
Yeah, I think that's how I think. I think in terms of stories. You know, there was an old Star Trek episode where Captain Picard ended up on the planet with some guy, some alien, and they were forced to work together. But the alien only spoke in allegory. He didn't speak like you and I are saying words that mean one thing. He would say something like, he would say, like the mountains over the sunrise. I don't know. He would speak in this, and I guess it would be called allegory. And so Picard had to figure out what that all meant. And I think in some ways I think that way. You know, if someone says something to me, my mind goes to an example of that. And so anyway, this is probably getting off the topic, but I find the storytelling a good way to teach, even when I was teaching. And I don't think of it now as teaching, but you're making me change my view maybe a little bit.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's not a bad thing. It's a great thing. It's sharing your legacy. So people are learning from it, not just being entertained. I don't want you to doubt that. They're learning too. So now you so you started a website, but you've started podcasting it though too, right? Right.
So the BobbieOnFire.com, BOBBIE, BobbieOnFire.com, it's a website. And then I just link those stories to, I guess it's Google Play and Apple Podcasts. And so it's all, and so it's evolving. Mm-hmm. You know, I started it last year, and so it's evolving. But so each story gets a little introduction. It gets, a written introduction. It gets a picture that kind of exemplifies what I'm thinking at the time that I'm going to tell the story. And then it gets a little link to the recording. And so I guess you can access it one of three ways, through Google, Apple, and just go into the website. Yeah, but I'm having
That's
a blast.
awesome. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you getting all techie because, a lot of people are like, I don't know how to do that. I'm not. It's like, go Google it and figure it out. Do something great.
I don't know how to do it either. My friend John, who comes and sits in on most
your
of
Google.
my stories. Yeah, he's my Google. That's right.
He's helping
so
you.
So it's been good, and I hope it keeps evolving too, because I don't want. Because it started out just being the funny stories, and then I realized, even the funny stories have a lesson, and now it's evolving into. I'm thinking ahead of time. What does this mean in a bigger picture? And the Lessons Learned Center linked last week to one of my stories, so they were obviously seeing some utility to it as well.
Great. That's good. Yeah, that's what they're all about. So that's perfect. One last question I have about your website. So maybe you have the story behind that, but the photo that you have of the guy standing on the roof with all the flames behind him, who is that? What's that? What's the story behind that picture?
It's not my picture. I found that picture, and it kind of exemplified to me the situation we're in these days with fire and the urban interface.
I figured it spoke to you. That's why I wanted to hear why it did.
Yeah. Well, there's some stories that I have about fighting fire in the urban interface, and some frustrations that I have about homeowner expectations that we're going to send, as you've seen, you're on a fire in the urban interface, and you've got, 100-foot flame lengths, and you're sitting there with 300 gallons on your engine, and we're sending a 4-person engine company or a 3-person engine company in to protect some house. And the homeowners think, well, the fire department's going to come and take care of me. And I've been on fires where, I think I told this story, where the homeowners, they were in level 2 evacuation for a week and never did anything to prepare their houses. And then they went to level 3. And as I'm driving up the switchbacks to the fire front, coming out of this is on the Los Padres, for example, the people now were raking the leaves off of their roof. Now they're moving their wood pile away from the wood fence that's connected to the house. And it was right after it was the year after Esperance, where we lost 5 firefighters. And I was so angry. I was so mad. I wanted to go up and just hit those people on the side of the head with a 2x4. How dare you? How dare you expect us to save your house when you have done nothing to save your own? So that picture, as you asked, that picture to me speaks to that. There's a guy on a roof. He might as well have had a little hose with a, couple quarts an hour coming out of the end of the hose standing there.
Yeah. Wow, cool.
Anyway,
it's a really good descriptor. I like it. Well, great. Bobbie. Yeah. So bobbieonfire.com. I want all you guys to go listen to her stories. And if you can look it up on wherever you listen to podcasts with your Google Play, or like I looked it up in my Apple podcast. So I am subscribed so that whenever you do drop one, it will just pop up for me. See, so that's how that works. I know it's not, it'll pop up, not super techy. And then I can listen to your stories. They're great to listen to while you're driving or getting ready in the morning, and just little twist of either funny or shocking or sad in them, which is what we all love. So thank you so much for sharing those, Bobbie. I really appreciate you. I want you to know that. I appreciate you,
pleasure.
How you're carrying on your legacy, but don't forget to retire. Looks like you are doing that. But I think the problem with these jobs, with these careers that we have, is they weren't real jobs. They were dream jobs. Whether they were frustrating, some days seem like absolute hell, but I think that's why so many people have a problem with just retiring and being done. There are some people that do, and they do it great, and they walk away and they never think about it again. But I don't want to have a job where I'll never think about it again. I want.
Right.
So I think that speaks a lot to it, about how you're still living it, you're still mentoring, you're still, doing all this. So, if I commend you for that. Thank you for doing that. And because I know not all of your career was easy, you guys, that it's all these there's all of us have a lot of darkness in our careers. There were troubles that we had. There were sad times. There were moments where either you didn't want to go on with the rest of your life, or you didn't want to go to tomorrow. You didn't want to show back up. But it's great to think about those moments where you're like, holy crap, I'm getting paid to do this. And so, but now you can do it and say whatever you want from a boat.
That's right.
From Arizona.
From the boat.
Oh God, I love that. I've got to come see that boat at some point. So,
well, you're welcome in Arizona or up at the boat.
I appreciate it. I think I might take you up on the boat. I usually don't go to Arizona unless it's on fire. Love you guys in Arizona. I really do. But yeah, usually I've been on so many fires there. It's like I tend to move to the north when comes time for fun. Right. All right. Well, with that, Bobbie, you guys go visit bobbieonfire.com, listen to her stories, give her feedback. Will you guys leave her some reviews on podcasts? You can do that. I don't know about Google Play, but I know on Apple you absolutely can. And Bobbie, is your website made for commenting, or how can people reach out to you?
Oh, they can. Yeah, you can leave comments. You can leave comments at bobbieonfire.com. You can contact me through that, through the website. And I really appreciate the feedback. I mean, I've had in just 6-7 months now, I've had over 30,000 downloads of stories. I don't get that many comments. And so I like it when I do get comments, because I like it when someone says, yeah, that happened to me, or, how did you handle this? And so that kind of feedback really makes it easier for me to tell the next story.
Perfect. And how about on social media? Are you floating around on there?
Bobbie on Fire is also on Facebook.
Perfect. Great. So you guys reach out. She'd love to hear some feedback. And with that, Bobbie, I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It was very fun talking with you, Abby.
And that is all we have for you in this episode. You've been listening to Her Brotherhood with me, Abby Bolt. Thank you so much for being here with us. It is just an honor to spend this time with you and to have your support. Go to Instagram, check out Her Brotherhood there, and on Facebook. Just let us know what you think about the show. Send me an email. Check out the show notes. Be sure to go check out bobbieonfire.com. She is sharing some really inspirational and funny stories. Thank you. I really appreciate you and everything that you do. And with that, don't stop choosing the hard right over easy silence. I'll see you next time.